Welcome everyone to our teaching on the centers of intelligence. This is our second talk in our short series of the Enneagram, or introduction really to the Enneagram. Which, the reason I'll tell you why I got into this is because the Enneagram, of course, is a tool of transformation, helps us grow spiritually, emotionally. The reason that I got into it is that I have noticed that I can listen to 100 sermons on, let's say, being more patient or not being so quick-tempered. You can be in church and listen to teachings about changing a particular behavior that you don't like, that you see in yourself, and yet nothing really changes. So you can know a lot, but not necessarily really have it change in any way. And so when I came upon this tool that actually helps us move from our thinking to our doing, it was so very helpful. So it's not just about taking in information about transformation and taking in information about God, but it's also living it and walking it. So that's just by introduction of why I got interested in this tool. We really have to know ourselves before we can change, right? We have to know our challenges, we have to know our strengths before there's any hope for change. So today I want to talk about the three centers of intelligence, this triad of the head intelligence, the heart intelligence, and the gut intelligence. Now, we have all three. However, we will find that we lead with one of them. We're going to favor one. And it's very helpful to know which one you favor, because later on, as part of the challenge and part of the growth, we can start to bring up the other two centers that we're not really paying much attention to. But first, let me explain what they are. And the first one is fairly straightforward, and you'll recognize these centers when I start to talk about them, because you have them already. But the point of this talk is to help you identify which one you lead with. The first one I want to talk about is the head center. If you are, or if you're familiar with the Enneagram, if you are a type 5, 6, or 7, you will be part of this head center, or this thinking center. Now, it won't surprise you that this type, the thinking center, people, respond to life and what's happening in their lives and the world by thinking about it. They like to think before they act. They tend to lead with their minds, their mental capacities. They're not going to be necessarily led by their feelings about everything, like the heart-based people. They're going to be people that are more logical, are going to be stopping, and they're going to be thinking, and they're going to be analyzing things. Now, again, we all do this, but some of us will lead with this and others will lead with another intelligence. Head-centered people are all fear-based people. Now, again, yes, we all have fear, but this is the predominant energy within this particular type. 5, 6, and 7. They are fear-based. They're all looking for security. And of course, we all try and find security in different ways. So even within this grouping of people who are fear-based, that's the energy, that's the predominant thing that's there. And by the way, it needn't necessarily be conscious, it could be unconscious. 5, 6, and 7 deal with fear in different ways. Type 5 just simply withdraw. They just withdraw, and that's one way of dealing with something, isn't it? One way of dealing with something is, I'm not going to deal with it, I'm just going to withdraw. Type 6, the way they deal with their fear, and this is a real common one, they play out worst case scenario. Okay, what's the worst thing that can happen here? Okay, yeah, I think I know. This could happen, this could happen, this could happen. And then you try and figure out ways that it won't happen. It's a way of dealing with fear. And type 7 simply deny their fear. And they keep busy using their active minds to plan and have all sorts of options and have fun. It's like, what fear? I'm too busy having fun. So they're all very different people. The 5, 6, and 7, very, very different types of people, but all are fear-based. All are from this thinking, this head center, 5, 6, and 7. They're all dealing with life. They're receiving information in the same way, and they lead with this idea of, let me just stop. Let me just think about this first. We just think about it. Whatever comes to them, that's going to be their first response. Now, this is very, very different from the head center. And what's fascinating is that when you can identify your lead center, you will start to see how different others are around you and how other people lead with a completely different type of intelligence. For example, the next one would be the heart or the feeling center, and you can already guess how that feeling center or that heart center operates, because they receive whatever's happening in life. If they're making decisions or they're moving ahead in a project, it's always about, how does it feel? How does this feel? This is the type 2, 3, and 4. Very interested in connecting with other people. Interestingly enough, the head center, the heart center people, the 2s, the 3s, and the 4s, very concerned about feeling. What does this feel like to me? This doesn't feel like it's the right thing. Or I feel like this is the right thing to do. The heart-centered people, if the head-centered people are concerned about fear, heart-centered people suffer from, let's call it, sadness. Now again, grief or sadness, again, this need not necessarily be right up front in your mind. This could well be under layers, but that's going to be the predominant suffering of the heart types. It's going to be grief and sadness. Now, the 2, 3s, and 4s deal with this sadness in very different ways. The type 2 deals with this sadness by focusing on helping everyone around them, and sometimes overextending. You'll know people like this. They just have a knack for finding what somebody needs, figuring out what people need, and they desire to meet that need. Now, without going into the challenges and the strengths of that, it's a way that type 2 deals with sadness and grief. Type 3 basically deny the sadness and get busy. And type 3s are efficient, they're busy people, they can juggle lots of things, multitask very, very well. And you know, when you're really into a project, when you're really multitasking, and when you're super busy, you don't have any time to be feeling anything, let alone grief or sadness. So it's a way of coping. And the type 4s also, 2, 3, and 4 are all the heart types, all lead with their feelings. The type 4 can focus their feelings inwardly, and if they stay there too long, you know, like the paralysis of analysis, if you stay there too long for the type 4, they can get very depressed by all these feelings. So your heart center people, the type 2, 3, and the 4, their first response to making a decision or responding to a request or something going on in the world, it's not going to be quite like the head type, who's going to immediately going to be mental capacity. They're going to be thinking about things. The heart type are going to be feeling things first. Now, again, it doesn't mean that that nobody's thinking. It means that for the heart type, they're primarily going to be led by feelings first. And the third center of intelligence, and again, we have all three of these, right? We have all three. So, but we'll favor one. Last center of intelligence in this triad, the 3, triad for 3, is what we call the instinctive center or the gut center. It's when you feel it in your gut. It's a body-based intelligence. Type 8, 9, and 1. Now, if you know anything about 8s and 9s and 1s, 8s and 9s are very, very different, but it's interesting that they're in this center, this body center, which means that if the thinking people are working things out with their minds and their mental capacity, and if the heart types are feeling their way through life, then the gut people are responding quite differently because they actually feel something going on in their body. It's an immediate body response. If something's wrong, it's not fair, I feel it here. I don't have to think about it necessarily because it's instinctive, right? If something's right, if something's wrong. If I want to do this, if I don't want to do this. If I like this, if I don't like it. There's a gut reaction if this is fair, if this is not fair. It's a gut reaction. It's immediate. I don't need to go think about it for half an hour and get back to you. And I don't necessarily have to go and feel it and process my feelings. I don't need that because I have a body intelligence that shows me exactly what I need to do or what I need to say in the moment. It is extremely fast, immediate. Now, for the 8s, 9s, and 1s, if thinking people are fearful and heart people are sad, then gut people are angry. Now, again, you look at a type 9, you're not necessarily going to think, whoa, that's a really, really angry person. Because this anger that is there within this triad, this gut response, the anger that's there isn't necessarily always upfront and obvious, like most things in our lives, right? That's why the scripture speaks so much about the motives of the heart. So much is not necessarily, obvious to us. But gut people, the 9s, the ones and the 8s, they deal with this anger differently. The 9s repress it. It's just repressed. I want to be at peace within myself, therefore I cannot be angry, and it's just gone. It's just not there. Well, actually it is. It's hidden, but it's not felt anger. Let's just say that. The 1s, the type 1, again, they deny it. They get busy because they want to do things well. They have a high standard and they figure out somehow that if I can just do things well, do it as perfectly as I can do it, and keep this high standard, I'll stave off all of this anger and I'll make it through. Doesn't necessarily always work, obviously, but it's a way of coping with anger that's always there, that energy that's within that triad. And with the 8s can just simply overexpress anger, because with an 8, a type 8, 8s are not shy nor withholding when it comes to displaying their displeasure. They can easily give an opinion, unlike a 9. The 8 won't have any problem telling you, I don't like that. I don't agree with that. I don't think we should do this. And they can be very forthright and at times over-express the anger. It's all ways of dealing with that core suffering, isn't it? The 8s, the 9s, and the 1s. Now, for all the centers, as I said, you're going to favor one of these and lead with one of them: head, heart, and gut. Our emotional and our spiritual growth comes when we become more aware of how we're responding to life and living in this world. Like I said earlier, we can listen to 100 teachings and never really be in touch with our anger or our sadness, right? Or our fear. But there are ways when we start to pay attention and observe. We have capacity to use all 3 centers. If we are, for example, if we favor the thinking center, and if we ignore our heart intelligence, there's a strong possibility our relationships will suffer, because we're not going to be taking time with our feelings. Especially if you have a heart type in your life and they say, you're not communicating with me, or you're not listening to me, or you're in your head all your time. Yeah, I don't know if you understand me. Yeah, well, maybe you don't. Because maybe you're operating from 2 different sets of intelligence. Maybe you're always in your head and you're talking to someone who's feeling things. Wouldn't it be helpful to be able to identify where you're coming from? So even though we favor one of these centers, we can become more balanced, and we can become more whole when we start to pay attention to particularly the centers that we're missing or we're not favoring at all. So knowing which center you lead with opens up a whole lot more choices for you. When you're just going about your business in the world and when you're relating with other people, it's like, well, maybe I don't need to be led by my feelings all the time. Isn't that a new idea? Maybe I don't have to be driven by my feelings all the time. Maybe I can just step back a bit and have a think about this. You would be pulling up. If you were a thinking person, that means you'd be pulling up that heart intelligence. You'd be making it more available to yourself. Or you could make, if you were the gut center, maybe I don't have to be so reactive. You know, maybe I don't have to always express myself all the time. And maybe I can pause and maybe I can think about things first and slow down a little bit. Maybe that would help in my relationships with other people. Would that make a difference? Yeah. So we have all these, so you can see how this can be a great tool for growth, which of course the Enneagram is. Well, we've been gifted with these capacities, but we don't, all the 3 intelligences, the heart, the head, and the gut, but we don't necessarily use them all, do we? So one of the things that we learn from this is, from this particular, these 3 centers of intelligences, is that once I identify the center that is leading me, how can I bring up the other 2 to help balance me out? So if you're not sure what type you are, you can always go back to the previous teaching on the 9 different types. And but this particular teaching will give you a head start on what type you could possibly lead with. So looking at the 3 centers of intelligence can also help you find your Enneagram type. And in our first teaching, we looked at all 9 types. And if you're still not sure, after listening to that, what type you are, because it can take some time to figure that out. One of the ways to narrow your type down is by taking a look at these 3 centers of intelligence and seeing which one that you are most familiar with and operate on without thinking every day. So even though you favor one of these centers, we can become more balanced and whole when we pay attention to the intelligence of the heart, the head, and the gut. Really, we want to learn how to draw from all 3. So the one that comes naturally to us, let's say we're thinking center based, well, that's going to come pretty naturally to us. So the challenge, the growth point for the thinking center then would be to draw up the other 2, the heart and the gut. Be more intentional about that. Let's just say that when we're going through our life, when we're making decisions, when we're in relationships. So knowing which center you lead with can open up a whole lot more choices for you. Maybe I don't need to be led by my feelings all the time if I'm a heart type. Or maybe I don't need to be so reactive. Does it come naturally to me? Yeah, it does. I'm an 8. Yes, I'm a gut intelligence type of person. Maybe I can stop and think and draw from my mental capacities, my intelligence, my head center. You see? So it's a way of stopping and using all 3 centers. Because we've been gifted with all these capacities, and sometimes there are parts of us that we don't give too much attention to, and it's like an unopened gift in some ways. So just even pausing and recognizing what is leading us, how we're being led. Is it by my head, my heart, my gut? And then the follow-up question might be, am I missing something here? Am I missing something? Can the other 2 centers of intelligence help inform this decision in some way, or how I should move forward, or what I should do in this relationship, or whatever it would be? So there we have the Enneagram, the 3 centers of intelligence, and in our first video, we went through the 9 types. So if you're not sure what type you are, you can narrow it down by knowing your center of intelligence, because there we have the 1, the type 1, the type 8, and the type 9 in the body center, and we have the 2, 3, and 4 in the heart center, and then we have the 5, 6, and 7 type in the head center. So you've narrowed it down quite a bit.